2019 with a positive recommendation from officers. However, the committee's decision was to refuse the application. Under an application submitted in 2020, approval was given by the committee for the alteration to the wording of the Section 106 of the original application to vary the type of affordable housing from shared ownership to discount market sale housing. This is some of the wording from that Section 106 agreement under that application, which sets out the eligibility criteria for someone looking to purchase the properties, which includes stipulations that the individual would have to be a resident of Hertsmere or employed somewhere in Hertsmere or have a relative within Hertsmere, and any household would have to earn less than £80,000 a year. So in terms of the background to the policies, policy CS4 of the core strategy outlines that to increase the supply of affordable housing, developments of 5 self-contained residential units or more should make the provision for an element of affordable housing, and that element should be to the tune of 35% of the overall units provided. In November 2014, a written ministerial statement was published which outlined that on sites of 10 units or less, affordable housing contributions should not be sought, and this was then reflected in NPPF policies, namely paragraph 65, which outlined that developments which are not major residential developments should not be required to provide any affordable housing contribution, and major residential developments defined within the Development Management Procedure Order as residential development with 10 or more dwellings or a site area of 0.5 of a hectare or more. So at the time of the determination of the original application, it was common practice for officers to enforce policy CS4 despite the changes to national policy, and therefore require applicants to provide affordable housing on sites with more than 5 dwellings. However, it is now considered that as national policy supersedes local policy, officers should adopt paragraph 65 of the NPPF and the DMPO in decision making. In this case, the development provided 9 units with a site area of 0.15 of a hectare, which is under the threshold as set out by the DMPO and NPPF for the obligation of affordable housing. The development is therefore not considered a major development, thus an affordable housing contribution could be considered an onerous addition to the contributions of the developer. The relevant policy in the assessment of the application is Section 106A of the Town and Country Planning Act, which relates to the modification of legal agreements. Officers consider that Part B is relevant in this case, reading that where an application is made to an authority under Section 106, the authority may determine if the obligation is no longer serves a useful purpose, the obligation may be discharged. Officers are therefore addressed in the assessment whether the obligation serves a useful purpose. Officers have also considered Regulation 122 of the Community Infrastructure Levy, which relates to the planning obligations, and particularly Part A, which reads that a planning obligation may only constitute a reason for granting planning permission for the development if the obligation is necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. At the time of the determination of the original planning permission in 2015, officers considered that the planning obligation to provide affordable housing met these terms. Under the current application, officers must consider the relevant policies outlined and the changes to practice since the original planning permission, namely the adoption of paragraph 65 of the NPPF in decision making. National policy indicates that the development is acceptable without an affordable housing contribution obligation, as the development is not considered a major residential development. Therefore, officers can conclude that the obligation is not necessary to make the development acceptable as per the SIL regulations. Therefore, the obligation no longer serves a useful purpose in accordance with Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act. So in terms of other matters, members have expressed at previous committees that insufficient evidence had been provided by the applicant to show that the affordable housing units had been appropriately marketed and that best efforts had been made to ensure that the units were sold at affordable rates. Since the last committee, members will have seen the appendices to the addendum committee report, which includes significant evidence that the applicant endeavoured to release the affordable housing units to registered providers, both as shared ownership and discount market sale housing. This evidence included 25 of the 180 letters that were sent to registered providers in 2017 following the original planning permission. The applicant provided 22 example letters that were sent to registered providers in 2019 and several response letters from the registered providers outlining that there was no interest in taking on the properties. Then 44 chase letters from the applicant to registered providers who had not responded to the original letters in 2019. And the evidence also included a letter sent to the Chief Exec of Hertsmere Borough Council offering the units to be purchased, but also to asking to work collaboratively with the Housing Department on finding new RPs to contact. Following this, 71 example letters were provided from 2021, where the applicant again reached out to RPs following the change to the Section 106 agreement to allow the units to be sold at discount market sale. While officers originally recommended the approval of the application with only the evidence as shown in Appendix 6 of the addendum, the letters were sent by the applicant, and those being the letters sent by the applicant in 2021, it is now considered that the evidence provided over the course of 6 years indicates a substantial effort on behalf of the applicant to dispose of the dwellings as affordable housing units. As outlined in the previous committee, along with reaching out to registered providers, the applicant also marketed the dwellings on popular housing website Rightmove. The dwellings were marketed from April 2021 to December 2024 on the platform as discount market sale dwellings. Officers then asked the agents to track any responses or declarations of the interest in the properties for a 6-month period from December 2024 to April 25. In order to do this effectively, the agent deleted the old postings on Rightmove and created a new post for this information. The previous posts on Rightmove are no longer available to view. However, the applicant has shared some of the Rightmove data from the December to April period, including the above, which shows the number of clicks onto each property in this time period. As members can see, there was some interest in the properties with between 12 to 35 clicks as an average per day. The agent provided the data for those attempting to purchase the properties, which shows very little interest in the properties, and those who did show interest were not able to secure the properties for 2 primary reasons. They were not able to meet the financial criteria of the discount market sale housing, or did not work or live in the borough, which was a stipulation of releasing the discount market sale housing in the Section 106. Evidence in the way of email correspondence has been provided today to officers, so I'm sharing that with members. This will be the first time that you will have seen this information, and that evidence indicates that the properties under assessment were advertised up until 2023 by Barker's Estates in Boreham Wood. However, there was no interest raised and no viewings were organised by this estate agency. Then in 2023, the applicant decided to change the estate agent to Abacus Estates, who are located in West Hampstead, as they had recently started a new homes division. And it was considered that this specialised division would raise greater interest in the properties. A question has been raised by members as to whether it's appropriate for an estate agent in West Hampstead to advertise dwellings thoroughly that are located in Boreham Wood. Officers consider that while there may be limited expression of interest through footfall, i.e. people looking through the shop window and thinking I'm going to inquire, the dwellings were advertised on the company website and again also on Rightmove. So the evidence that has been provided with the current application and previous applications regarding the disposal of the affordable housing units does not supersede the policies that were discussed earlier in the presentation. However, it does give officers indication that the discount market sale housing interest has been low or the eligibility criteria has not been met. Since the development was completed, the affordable housing units have been marketed as 2 types of affordable housing and have remained unoccupied. Officers must consider that the housing supply in Hertsmere is at a critical level for market housing, and the council currently have no 5-year housing land supply. Inspectors in previous appeals have outlined that a single dwelling could contribute positively to the housing stock of the borough, and therefore officers consider that the release of the units could contribute to the market rate housing stock in Hertsmere. To conclude, officers consider the planning obligation to provide 35% affordable housing units to no longer serve a useful purpose or comply with Regulation 122 of the SIL regulations. Officers are satisfied that the evidence shown indicates that the housing units could contribute positively to the housing stock of the borough, and therefore it's recommended the modification of the Section 106 agreement to remove the obligation to provide affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a speaker, so if I can ask Mr. Matthew Pearce to come. Thank you, sir, to speak for the application, and you will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Matthew Pearce from HCH Consulting, and I represent the applicant this evening. Members will be aware of the background to this application, which is obviously set out in the officer's report, including the reason for deferring the application from the March committee. The applicant is applying to remove the obligation for affordable housing provision for the 9-unit scheme, as they have not been able to release the affordable housing units, and there is no longer a policy requirement for a scheme of this size to provide any. In regard to a commuted sum, which was mentioned at the March committee, there is again no policy justification for such a commuted sum, and any obligation would not meet the test set out in the MPPF of being necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, or being fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. Since the deferral, we have submitted a significant number of letters to registered providers from 2017 and 2019, as well as a letter to Hertsmere Borough Council and further additional letters to registered providers in 2021. In addition, marketing information was provided for the 2024 Rightmove listings, which showed that there was a considerable interaction with the listings, but this did not unfortunately translate into many prospective buyers, and if they did, they didn't meet the relevant criteria. Whilst the officer considered the application to be acceptable with just the evidence previously submitted, we hope that it is now clear to members of the committee that the applicant has made a considerable and extensive effort to dispose of the units as both shared ownership and discounted market rate over a significant amount of time without any success. In the March committee, there was commentary about the windfall of the units being released for market sale. This is, however, not the case, as interest on the loans, refinancing due to the units being empty, and other financial matters means that the applicant won't make a considerable profit on this scheme. They're not applying to remove the obligation for means of profit, but simply because they cannot dispose of the flats in their current format, although this is not a material consideration. As evidenced by the applicant, since the original application was approved in 2016, the applicant has made a significant attempt to dispose of the 3 affordable housing units without any success. The applicant was committed to providing affordable housing within the scheme, but unfortunately this has not been possible. The applicant has therefore applied to remove the obligation based on the lack of policy requirement for it and the evidence of extensive unsuccessful marketing. Approving the application this evening will mean that the flats can be disposed of, giving people somewhere to live rather than continuing to remain vacant. There's a significant need for housing in Hertsmere. Allowing these units to be occupied would make a small contribution to this. I would therefore respectfully ask that you support the officer's recommendation and approve our application tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Officers, do you have any comments before I ask members?
Not so much a comment as sort of an addendum to the presentation. I do apologise, members. There was supposed to be a slide about the commuted sum that was discussed at the last committee. That was discussed with the applicant briefly. However, it was the consideration of officers that with respect to Regulation 122, which as members will recall read, that a obligation has to be necessary to make a development acceptable. Because the application is not a major development and a new Section 106 would have to be written up to receive a commuted sum, if we were to ask for a commuted sum on a scheme that would be acceptable without affordable housing planning obligation, that would be unlawful in of itself. So it's actually not something that officers can do. So that matter was sort of put to the side in lieu of providing further evidence for members.
Thank you very much. And members, do you have any questions for officers? Yes, Councillor Morris.
Sorry, mine's not so much a question, just a comment under declarations of interest. I had not realised until a moment or two ago, until we saw the presentation, that Abacus Estates, or the owner of Abacus Estates, until 12 months ago was my neighbour. I have had no involvement with this or anything else, but I thought for transparency I should make you aware. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I might also make it aware that we didn't know what estate agents were asked until you told us.
Right. As in, did I notify members?
No, you didn't. We didn't know until this evening.
No,
so you wouldn't have known until now. Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Rosehill.
Thank you. I noticed on one of the letters it was addressed to Sajida. I was just wondering what Hertsmere's response was when it was offered the flats under shared ownership.
So as far as I'm aware, I haven't seen the response letter from Sajida, but I understand as a result of that letter, the applicants housing team, or the applicant themselves, were put in touch with our housing department, and they were given a list of some registered providers that they hadn't yet reached out to. That was what they were trying to do in that instance, was they had exhausted their own list. They wanted to find out from us, basically, if we wanted them, and if we didn't want them, who else could they reach out to.
Councillor Kaza.
Thank you, Chair. Emily, thank you for your the technical meeting and during which we went over the past timeline leading up to 2025. I just want to know, post 2021, when the last set of letters were sent to the registered providers, have there been any other communications with by the applicant to registered providers? That's all.
As far as I have been made aware, I don't think there has been, but that's only because I've only seen the evidence provided up to the 2021 letters. So if there is other evidence past 2021, I haven't been provided with it.
Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. It's disappointing that we find ourselves here again looking at exactly the same thing. I do take Emily's point on board that obviously housing is at a critical level or a critical need in the borough, but by virtue that means that affordable housing is also a critical need in the borough. It seems like Section 106 agreements can be written that benefit the developers, however, penalises our residents here in Hertsmere. The application came forward with a positive recommendation from planners at the time to accept this planning application with the 3 affordable homes. That was written into the Section 106 agreement, and now developers can unwind that and not even have to discuss commutable sums. I believe the commutable sum for Boreham Wood is about £125,000 for a flat. As per the latest guidelines that we have. It's a considerable amount of money that we could actually use to provide much needed affordable homes in the borough. Yet again, we see Section 106 agreements being written that are detrimental to our residents, and it's really disappointing that we're in this situation. We can fundamentally change the Section 106 agreement to the benefit of developers, but we can't do it to the benefit of our residents. It's an appalling situation that we're in.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else they want to raise? No? Fair enough. So I will need, yes, Councillor Morris.
Whilst I can't disagree with much of what has been said, I also, looking at this, and can't see much option but to accept officers' proposals. I suspect I will have to be the proposer in this instance to accept officers' recommendations.
Can I have someone to second? Councillor Kaza, thank you. We can go to vote then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the recommendation as is set out in the report. So if I can ask members to vote. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Amron.
Abstain.
Councillor Gray.
From a moral standpoint, against.
Councillor Kazar.
For.
Councillor Lambert.
For.
Councillor Morris.
For.
Councillor Rosehill.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Sussman.
Abstain.
Councillor Green.
For.
Thank you. That recommendation has been carried.
Thank you very much, members. We now move on to 5B, which is 20/25/0105/FUL 80 to 82 Shenley Road. And I invite Holly to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is at 80 to 82 Shenley Road along the High Street. So the reason for committee determination is that the application site is owned by the council. This is just a location plan of the site. This is just an aerial view looking north. So the application site is located to the south of Shenley Road, which is within Bournemouth Town Centre. The site lies adjacent to Bournemouth Cinema along Centenary Place, and the nearest bus stop is just located to the west of the site. So the application proposes for the change of use of the existing property from Class E to F1, which comprises of a community centre with associated educational functions and office space. Cycle storage and refuse and recycling facilities are also proposed. So here are just some site photos to show the context of the site. The arrows show where the photos have been taken from. These are just some visualisations. So the only external alterations to the building is the proposed signage and the bin and cycle storage to the rear. So here are some proposed floor plans, including the ground floor, the first floor and the second floor plans. The key is just in the bottom right. So the green shows the community uses, the blue is the toilets and the grey is for storage or utility space. So paragraph 11 of the MPPF sets out plans and decisions should apply a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Community facilities are also strongly supported by CS13 of the core strategy and SADM 32 of the site allocation development management plan. Marketing evidence was provided as part of the application to show a Class E use would not be viable for this building, and as such it was considered to meet SADM 42. A retail survey was also provided to show that the proposal would not decrease Class E use below 70% along Shenley Road in accordance with SADM 43. So the site is also in a highly sustainable location within a 1-minute walk from the nearest bus stops and a 5-minute walk from a train station. Officers therefore consider the principle of the uses are supported in this location. In terms of character and appearance, no alterations are proposed to the external building, and the bin and cycle storage would be screened well by the existing boundary treatment along the rear, so no concerns were raised in that respect. In terms of residential amenity, a condition has been imposed to restrict the opening hours Monday to Friday, so 8 AM to 10:30 PM, in the interest of residential amenity. Environmental health raised no objections to the proposal subject to a noise condition, so it was considered that on residential amenity grounds, the application would be okay. In terms of parking, HCC Highways raised no objection, and as discussed, the site is in a highly sustainable location and cycle storage would be provided. In terms of flooding, the site is in flood zone 1, so no concerns were raised with flood risk, and refuse and recycling facilities would also be provided to the rear of the site, so no concerns were raised. Here are just the existing Class C frontages in the area, so the stars represent the Class C frontages just within the immediate locality. And in conclusion, officers recommend to grant subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no speakers for this item, so do members have any questions for officers? No? Can I have someone then to move that we recommend, yes, Councillor Gray and then Councillor Smith. Thank you very much. So we can vote now, thank you.
Thank you. So the recommendation is set out in the report. If members can vote, please. Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Amron.
4.
Councillor Gray.
4.
Councillor Kazar.
4.
Councillor Lambert.
4.
Councillor Morris.
4.
Councillor Rosehill.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Sussman. 4. Councillor Green.
4.
That's unanimous. That's been carried.
Thank you very much. We move now on to 5C, which is 25/0246/ADV, which is Hertsmere Borough Council Civic Office. And I invite Emily to present to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I will be presenting the advertising consent at Hertsmere Borough Council Civic Offices. This is an aerial view of the site, the building that we are currently sitting in, Shenley Road to the north and Elstree Way lying to the southeast. The proposal is for the erection of one LED screen along the southeast flank elevation of the Civic Offices building. These are some site photos. You can see there the larger photo, the Civic Offices from Elstree Way, and then a closer image of the approximate location of the screen, next where the Hertsmere Borough Council emblem is. This is an elevation plan where you can see the location of the screen highlighted in blue. The proposed screen would be 2 metres in width, 1.4 metres in height, and would be located 3.6 metres from the ground floor. The screen is considered to be modest in size and sympathetic to the character of the surrounding area, which is predominantly commercial in nature along Elstree Way. Owing to this character and the fact that there are limited residential dwellings along Elstree Way, the proposal is not considered to have a negative impact on residential amenity. The Highways officer has raised no objection to the scheme, outlining that subject to a condition, the screen should not distract drivers along Elstree Way, and that recommended condition is that the signage remains at an illumination level within the limit recommended by the institution of lighting professionals in the interest of highway safety. So on the basis of the above assessment and the consideration that there would be no harm to character and appearance, residential amenity or highway safety, officers recommend the approval of the advertising consent.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions? Ooh, lots. Right, Councillor Amron, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Emily, simple question. Do you know what the cost of this is going to be, please?
I've not been informed of the cost. Without being crass, that is not a planning consideration for an advertising consent.
Councillor Morris?
Thank you. Well, as many will know, this is an item that was discussed at some length at the technical briefing, and I freely admitted at the time that the points that I'm about to raise aren't necessarily planning considerations. However, I have been in communication with Sajida Bijlay regarding this particular site, and I happen to know, if I can answer your question, that this sign will cost between £20,000 and £30,000, because I have one. So I'm very familiar with the cost of these items. Whilst in planning terms, I have to agree with Emily, it is a struggle to recommend a refusal on this. I do think as both a panel and as a council, we need much further information, and I'm actually awaiting information from Sajida on this. And when the time is right, subject to what the committee proposes, I'd like to propose a deferral while we're waiting for this information, because for this council to spend £20,000 of public money when I'm sure that there are other areas more deserving, it is probably inappropriate. Thank you.
So, Councillor Morris, whilst I appreciate your insights as to knowing how expensive this is, I do not recommend that we defer it on something that isn't actually a planning consideration. You are completely correct that we should be asking why we're spending this money, but that is not for us to decide now. We can't defer something not on a planning reason.
I would just add then that I'm quite happy to vote for refusal if that is the stance the committee wishes to take. I think it would be more beneficial both to the council and to the officers who've done a lot of hard work to get an appropriate answer, as indeed we had with an earlier application regarding concerns that the committee had regarding how we were reallocating housing that had previously been agreed. So my soft approach was to suggest a deferral so as we can get a solution from officers. My harder approach is to say I would vote against the application.
Okay. Councillor Gray?
Thank you, Chair, and you're quite correct. The cost of an advertising board is not a consideration for this planning committee. Councillor Morris, being the director of Hertsmere Times in a commercial operation that actually rents out advertising space at the other end of the town, however, might be an issue for this committee, and I wondered if he'd like to make a declaration at this point and remove himself from the meeting. I think this is a great idea for Hertsmere. Obviously, print press has died. Digital information is difficult for some members of the public to read. And I think any way that we can get our council messaging out to the public and our residents is a worthwhile exercise to explore. Now, that's exactly what this is. We're exploring the option and getting the planning permission in place. So should that option decide to go ahead, we have the planning permission to do it. It is not like the previous application, because where we were there dealing with something that had already been built and actually existed. So I will be supporting this and proposing that we accept it at the right time. Thank you.
Councillor Sussman and then Councillor Lambert. Oh, Councillor Lambert, sorry, sir. Councillor Sussman's first, then you.
Sorry, right.
Apologies.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have one positive thing to say about this application, is that it won't distract drivers because it is too small to be seen and read from the road. What I will say is that I have some experience of big screens as well, not appearing on them sadly, but buying 3 recently for my estate agency business, buying professional screens, which I know are very expensive and mine are very small. I'd like to ask officers, what is the size of that screen, please, here in the chamber?
I don't know what the size of this screen is. But I would just, while I consider the point that is being made about the size of the screen, again, it is not for us to consider under an advertising consent the purpose or whether or not what is intended to be on the advertising screen is going to do what members hope it will do. It is simply to agree on whether or not it is going to cause harm.
Okay, thank you. My point is actually that I am very pleased that the chair has acknowledged that and agrees why on earth are we spending this sort of money on a screen such as this. And having spoken to a couple of screen companies the last couple of days, looking at the height and the distance, we've been recommended actually the more appropriate size screen would be 3 metres by 2 metres and not the size that is proposed. I find it absolutely extraordinary that this council can waste residents' money on something that isn't fit for purpose, and I would support going for a deferral in order that the council, so I would support Councillor Morris, in order that the council can actually look at something that might be fit for purpose and then decide if they actually don't want to waste residents' money on something that's going to have negative effect because it won't be able to do anything. I cannot support this application.
Fair enough. And just for the record, I didn't say it was a waste of money. I said it was a perfectly valid question to ask why we're doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, that isn't me saying it's a bad use or a good use of money. Don't put words in my mouth. We are here to discuss whether or not it should go up or not. We can wax lyrical about if we should be doing it at another point, I think. But anyway, Councillor Lambert.
You won't be too surprised to hear that I support what Councillor Morris and Councillor Sussman have already said. I think there's 2 points. One is, on the other matters, highways officers have raised no objection to the scheme, subject to a condition that the screen would not distract drivers along Elstree Way. And how do we put a condition in like that? I think it's a sign which is visible soon after coming off the roundabout. It has words on there. People will read it. They will be distracted at a potentially dangerous position where there is a turn right into the car park and there are also traffic lights. So I think it is a potential traffic issue. It's not as if the sign is straight ahead of drivers and they will see it. The other one is I just don't know how we can justify spending the sort of money that it's going to cost. So I know it's not planning application, planning regulations, but I do feel that we ought to send a message out to really question why are we doing it. Because if it's not aimed at the drivers, it's just aimed at a few passing pedestrians. So that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And may I just remind people that if you wish to vote against this, you need a planning reason. Yeah? Can I just remind you of that? Irrespective of if we think it's a good idea to spend money on it or not, you need a planning reason. Councillor Rosehill.
Thank you, Chair. I'm on the same page as my Conservative colleagues on this. I understand it's not a planning matter. However, we are the applicant, and that's where it's slightly different, because I'm not concerned about an appeal, because I wouldn't have thought that the council would take itself to appeal. So I think in this end, the important matter in this equation is either to defer so we get the accurate information as to why we're paying such an extortionate amount of money for a small screen that isn't visible for a council that's only going to be here for 2 more years. A council that's only going to be here for 2, maybe 3 more years.
While I understand the comments that councillors are making about the necessity of the screen and the cost attached to the screen, and like we've said, that is not necessarily in planning terms a matter for an advertising consent. I would also add to that this is an advertising consent for something that could come forward at a certain point. It could be in a few weeks' time, it could be in 2 years' time. It is not necessarily the case that because we recommend the approval of this advertising consent, that there will not be time in the interim to cover these matters at a different location that might be more appropriate, if that makes sense, where the necessity and the cost is discussed, rather than at the planning committee.
Councillor Gray?
Thank you. Emily, I've got a problem with the condenser on my fridge freezer. Do you can give me any tips on how to fix it and roughly how much that would cost as well, please?
That I do not, and that is not a planning consideration under the application, Councillor Gray.
It seems everybody else is having a go, so I thought I might ask you. You seem to be the oracle of everything.
Councillor Morris, do you have a different question to ask than the one you've already asked?
I've asked a question. I'm not going to disagree with Emily. What I was trying to do with my proposal is to find a halfway house where we can get further and better particulars, as we have done on other applications, rather than recommending refusal. And if I'm asked to come up with a reason for refusal, I'll come up with a reason for refusal, but that is not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for a deferral so that we can get better guidance from the Chief Officer of this council as to why we are spending it.
If there is a deferral, it needs to be on the planning grounds and as set out in the report of what's been considered in the application.
Councillor Lambert?
I can come up with the reason that is my interpretation of it. I do not see that it is going to not distract drivers as they go along Elstree Way, and so I would be rejecting it on safety grounds.
Councillor Allen.
I don't think this is a very fruitful discussion. If we refuse this, the only thing it achieves is to cause a headache for officers and a waste of time. So for those members who don't want this to happen or spend money on it, I think that's a question to the Chief Executive and to the relevant portfolio holder. It becomes a political question. But from a planning process, I think that trying to mess about with it in this way, in this room tonight, is just going to waste everybody's time.
Councillor Gray?
Yes, I'd like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, on the basis that my proposal for deferral came first, I would expect
it wasn't. You were thinking of a reason.
No, I wasn't. I asked for it in my opening comments that when it got to that point, I would request deferral.
Chair, I'm happy to second Councillor Gray's proposal.
Any deferral will need to be seconded, but before that, you need to have a deferral and the reason for deferral on planning grounds. before it's seconded.
Quite happy to defer on the basis of a lack of information provided to this committee.
That's not a planning reason, sorry.
Councillor Morris, you said you were mindful to do it and nobody seconded you. And I have had someone now propose that we accept it, and I've had someone second that. You can vote however you wish.
Okay, the recommendation is as set out in the report. I'm going to take the vote. Councillor Allen.
So I'm confused, but is this the deferral?
This is a recommendation as per the officer's report.
Sorry, 4.
Councillor Amron.
Okay. I have listened to what everybody's said on the balance of evidence. I think it's fruitless to refuse it, so I'm going to say, okay, accept.
4?
Yeah.
Is that a 4? Thank you. Councillor Gray?
4.
Councillor Kazar?
4.
Councillor Lambert?
Against.
Councillor Morris?
Against.
Councillor Rosehill?
Against.
Councillor Sussman?
Against.
Councillor Smith?
4.
Councillor Green?
4.
That recommendation has been carried.
Thank you very much. We move on to 5D, 25/0143/ADV 39, Theobald Street, Bournemouth, and Caitlin will present the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm presenting 39 Theobald Street in Bournemouth. The proposal is for an application for advertisement consent for the installation of a non-illuminated hoarding signage. The reason it's been brought to committee is because it is a council-owned site. So here is a site plan. Here is the application site, an aerial view of it. The sort of line in red will be the frontage of where the hoarding signage will be along Theobald Street. Here are some site photos. So the proposed advertisement would be non-illuminated and will be located along the frontage of the site on Theobald Street, with this one advertisement sort of image here being repeated across the full width of the hoarding. So in terms of the assessment, there were no concerns with regards to impact on character appearance or residential amenity. Environmental health raised no objections, and likewise highways raised no objections. Their recommended informatives have been attached with the report. Therefore, it's officer's recommendation to grant advertisement consent subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for the officer? Are we mindful to accept her recommendation?
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, Councillor Gray, second. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation is as set out in the report. If I can take the vote. Councillor Allen?
4.
Councillor Amron?
4.
Councillor Gray?
4.
Councillor Kazar?
4.
Councillor Lambert?
4.
Councillor Morris?
Councillor Morris, thank you.
Councillor Rosehill?
4.
Councillor Smith?
4.
Councillor Sussman?
4.
Councillor Green?
4.
That's unanimous. That's been carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 6 is planning appeals. Can everyone confirm they've received their list of current planning appeals? Thank you. Item 7 is any other business the chair considers urgent, which there isn't. Item 8, date of future meeting. The next meeting will be held on Thursday the 26th of June, and I close the meeting at 18:50. Thank you.